So, good afternoon, Chris. How are you?
Good afternoon. Very well. How are you?
Well, thank you. Tell us how this would work and how you would avoid that potential criticism there of a bit of a brain drain in our top firms.
Well, I don't accept that. First of all, companies already have to publish total CEO pay, both in this country and in many other countries. The proposal here is to publish the ratio between CEO pay and average worker pay. The ratio is currently somewhere between 125 and 150 times. So CEOs get paid about 150 times more than the average worker. And by publishing that ratio, it will just make companies think carefully about that. But actually, the major reform that I proposed, and which I hope is going to be in the Green Paper this week, is to create a powerful shareholders committee of the top 5 shareholders, or 5 shareholders voted by other shareholders, who would take control of setting executive pay instead of the remuneration committee. And their recommendations would then be voted on every year, bindingly, by all shareholders. Now, that may or may not lead to caps to executive pay. The point is, it would give shareholders control. So shareholders who effectively own these companies can decide whether or not they want to pay their executives a large amount of money and whether executives deserve that. At the moment, what happens is a cosy group of non-executives, led by the chairman and the remuneration committee, fix boardroom pay, and they've been giving themselves higher and higher pay increases each year, and sometimes shareholders who own the company disagree. Now, so for example, this year, the shareholders in BP voted against, 59% of them voted against the chief executive's £14 million pay package. Because the vote was only advisory, the company simply ignored that vote. Now, conversely, at WPP, the advertising company, shareholders there voted in favour of Martin Sorrell's £74 million pay package, and they voted it through. So it's up to shareholders. So people who say, well, it'll drive companies overseas, I disagree with that, because what this does is gives power to shareholders to take control of executive pay. And actually, I think putting shareholders in the driving seat, is how the free market should work.
So, Chris, I'm entirely sympathetic to this. I mean, of course, for me, this pay gap that you're discussing here is, frankly, it's disgusting. I'm entirely sympathetic, and I just want to understand the practicalities of it. I wish it does. I mean, I hope it works. But what would you say of the Bank of England chief economist's criticism that it isn't really feasible?
Well, I just don't accept that. In Sweden, they have these shareholder committees already, and they're very effective. People think that Swedish companies generally are quite well run. For example, they take a longer-term view, so investment in things like research and development by Swedish companies is around about twice the level of UK companies. So by giving shareholders more power, it actually makes the company take a slightly longer-term view, and they do more investment, which is good for the economy as a whole. So this is working in Sweden already.
But in English-speaking countries, why wouldn't top CEOs simply, for example, relocate to the United States?
Well, I mean, actually, the US is in the process of introducing mandatory publication of pay ratios already. And the point is that it's a judgment for shareholders. At the moment, these non-executive directors and the chairman are just voting each other voting executive directors big pay rises, bypassing shareholders. It simply gives shareholders the right to make the decision. So some shareholders may decide that it is worth paying more to get some top CEO to stay here. Other shareholders may think someone else who they can pay less can do just as good a job. The point is it gives the power to shareholders who own these companies to take responsibility and take these decisions. And they can make that judgment themselves. It's not for me as a member of parliament or for the media to sort of make judgments about how much chief executives should or should not get paid. It's up to the shareholders. And the problem with the current system is that shareholders have been cut out of decision-making.
Yeah,
and I think that is one of the reasons why pay has spiralled out of control.
I mean, I sympathise with that. But about what I'm asking specifically is why wouldn't top CEOs simply relocate to another English-speaking country? I mean, I get the point you're making that shareholders decide this, but if they did eventually decide this, a top CEO could he not simply relocate to the US?
Yeah, well, look, if shareholders were worried about that, then they would vote them a higher pay package, right? So if shareholders thought that a particular person who they really wanted would go to the US, and they would simply pay them a bit more to keep them, if they thought that person was worth it. Personally, I wonder whether really, the average CEO total package, by the way, if you take into account options, share options, bonuses, pension and everything, it's about £6 million a year on average. That means half of them get more than that. I just question whether people really need £6 million a year in order to sort of be persuaded to stay in the UK. I'm sure you could pay them a lot less than that and people would still be happy happy to work here. But it's a judgment, it's a trade-off that shareholders can make.
All right, last question, Chris. I mean, it sounds fascinating. It's something which is right up my alley in terms of social justice and what have you. Isn't it a bit of a left-wing policy for the Tory party to adopt?
No, I don't think it is, because a left-wing policy, the kind of thing that Jeremy Corbyn or John McDonnell, the Shadow Chancellor, would do, or their hero Fidel Castro, for that matter, would be to legislate to cap salaries. Right, a socialist thing would be to pass a law that just says nobody can earn more than X amount. That would be a socialist thing to do. This is actually this proposal is consistent with the free market because for free markets and for capitalism as a system to work, the owners of capital, shareholders in this case, need to be put in the driving seat, and we're handing them that power. So actually, this proposal not only will, I think, reduce executive pay, it will also return to the principles of how the free market and how capitalism should work. And at the moment, it's not working quite how it should, so we need to make these changes to make it work properly. So that's a very conservative, very free market thing to do.
Not working quite how it should. We can definitely agree there. Chris Philp, Conservative MP for Croydon South and member of the Treasury Select Committee. Thank you for joining us this afternoon.